Yep, Boating Buddies. The most infamous Squidward torture porn is only number 3 on this list. When I started making this list, everyone thought this would be my number 1. Hell, even I thought that this would be my number 1. But doing my research, watching these episodes again and again, I found that I hate not 1, but 2 Squidward torture porns more than this fucking episode. It's not like I don't hate this episode though. And it's not like I don't know why people hate this episode. Remember when I said that Squid's Visit wasn't the creepiest episode of the show? That's because, to me, this episode is. Because this episode is creepy. It's intensely creepy. It's unwatchably creepy. Let's start with the fact that SpongeBob decides to annoy Squidward because he was just breathing. When Squidward decides to go away to ignore him, SpongeBob decides to chase him down. Why? Because Squidward left his car keys behind. Yeah, Squidward has a car in this episode. Which gets him to run through a stop sign, which forces him to spend a day in hell. Yeah, Squidward has to go to boating school. Fan-fucking-tastic. And as you might imagine, SpongeBob is there. Now here's an interesting fact. For this entire episode, Mrs. Puff seems to have forgotten how horrible that SpongeBob is. What I meant is that she doesn't seem to fucking care. And then we get into the creepy aspect. SpongeBob seems to have a rather unsettling attraction to Squidward that constantly surfaces throughout the entire episode. When the episode isn't focusing on the stalker with a crush, it's focused on giving Squidward beating after beating. And what was Squidward's crime in this episode? Trying to get away from SpongeBob. For doing that, he's forced to be stuck with SpongeBob. For getting pissed about it, he ends up getting beaten up. For no fucking reason, Mrs. Puff forces Squidward to drive with SpongeBob. Despite knowing how dangerous SpongeBob is, knowing that Squidward also hates SpongeBob, and never having partners drive in any other episode ever. This leads to a random shrink ray incident that ends up with Squidward being beaten up and ending up in a body cast. Because he's in a body cast, he ends up failing the test, which any normal teacher, or Mrs. Puff in any other episode, would allow him to take when he's not injured. And so he gets sentenced to another week in boating school. The worst part of this episode is obviously the ending, where after being righteously pissed, Squidward yells at SpongeBob, and circumstances forces him to call SpongeBob his boating buddy, and Squidward fails anyway. Which means next week the same shit will happen, but even worse. So yeah, Boating Buddies is heinously bad. The only question is what could possibly top it? Well, so what outright shoots Choir Boys into the top 2? 2 words, malicious intent. In most of the previous episodes, SpongeBob tormented Squidward through accidents or complete stupidity. So take one of those episodes and have SpongeBob actively attempt to annoy Squidward, take his dreams away, and hurt him. Don't believe me? Well, the episode starts with Squidward practicing singing in the shower when he passes by his toilet. Outside, Squidward passes by SpongeBob and smiles because he's feeling down. Remember this because apparently this is the most heinous crime that one could possibly commit. It's used to give justification for SpongeBob trying to nag Squidward, chase him down, dig a giant pothole to quote-unquote get Squidward's attention, which forces him to be surrounded by jellyfish. It continues to sing as Squidward gets repeatedly zapped. How is this funny? Just because Squidward is at the ass of your jokes does not automatically make them funny. Jesus fucking Christ, that's disgusting. One reason this episode is so high on the list is that we're constantly given terrible singing and annoying throat clearing all the way through. Needless to say, it grates on you. Yeah, this is the only episode on the list that's unlistenable on top of unwatchable. Also, SpongeBob suddenly gets the ability to sing greatly and upstages Squidward at the men's chorus. So yeah, we have an episode where Squidward does next to nothing wrong, SpongeBob continually torments him to a severe degree and does it knowingly, and SpongeBob wins in the end. What could possibly be worse? Now, I don't think a lot of people will agree with me here, because when it comes to worst SpongeBob episodes, I always give a more abstract answer. I seem to hate more what each episode represents, rather than its overall production. So bear with me as I present my number 1, which is probably an episode you most likely don't care about. Presenting A Breath of Fresh Squidward. Most of you are probably thinking that it does belong on the list just further down, and definitely not number 1. Well, let me try to explain why I hate this episode so much. The episode starts with SpongeBob and Patrick watching Squidward sleep. Apparently a favorite pastime of theirs is watching the sunrise in Squidward's bedroom. And then we see a book of all of the main holidays, while it looks like Squidward is about to have an aneurysm. As far as I can tell, they believe this story. Yeah, I'm calling this episode the worst Squidward torture porn, taking every one of those other ones into account. This time, Squidward tries to use an electric fence to keep SpongeBob and Patrick out. And of course, the two of them think they're invited to a fence warming party. So Squidward catapults them away and turns on the fence. Considering Squidward's experience with home security, we all know that this isn't going to work for a second. Yeah, somehow they get catapulted back into Squidward's fence. He angrily touches the security gate, which gets himself electrocuted. SpongeBob and Patrick are totally unaware that Squidward is being electrocuted in front of them, despite being repeatedly stung and shocked by electric jellyfish. The electroshock switches Squidward's personality entirely. He wants to go to the petting zoo with SpongeBob and Patrick, so Squidward is actually happy. Even SpongeBob sees that Squidward is happier, and he says that with a smile. Remember that. Things get interesting when Squidward sneaks into SpongeBob's house. Why SpongeBob didn't sneak into Squidward's house that morning, I have no idea. But as you can see, this episode is giving SpongeBob a taste of his own medicine. Like most episodes that end up at the top of my worst lists, they do something right. SpongeBob has to deal with his own SpongeBob, and let me just say that after everything I've seen, it's really fucking cathartic. Now here's what really sticks it for me. Squidward is acting like SpongeBob. You know, the fucking annoying one that sneaks into Squidward's house, and the episode itself sees him as an antagonist. Every time Squidward tries to do something that SpongeBob usually does, he's treated like a creep. So yeah, the writers, or the entire universe, is a hypocrite. Good to know. You know, I'd be more sympathetic with SpongeBob here if the episode didn't begin with him admitting that he breaks into Squidward's house and watches him sleep every single morning. Not to mention all the other fucking stuff I've seen. So it turns out that Squidward is a better SpongeBob than SpongeBob, and ends up becoming the new Employee of the Month. Once again, after all the shit I've seen, it's extremely cathartic. And like I said, this episode keeps expecting me to feel sorry for what's happening to SpongeBob, which is not going to happen. SpongeBob, you deserve a SpongeBob of your own. Even the SpongeBob we get in this episode deserves his own SpongeBob. Then there's a party at Patrick's house, and SpongeBob is still crying. Seriously, dude, you lost an award. Get over yourself. And Pogo dancing with Patrick seems to be SpongeBob's final straw. He snaps and basically becomes a whiny, spoiled brat, and kicks Squidward out of his own party, in someone else's house, and everyone else continues the party. This forces Squidward to cry, which I actually do feel sorry for, which causes him to electrocute himself, you know, despite the fence blowing a gasket earlier. Like I said, it's not so much that this episode has the most torment given to Squidward, or even that it's the worst put together. It's that the episode expects me to buy the SpongeBob that I've dealt with in Boating Buddies, in Choir Boys, in Cephalopod Lodge, in Good Neighbors as the good guy, and the Squidward in those very episodes as the bad guy. Let's just say that that's perhaps the most insulting thing that a writer can try and do. If SpongeBob learned that being an annoying menace that makes Squidward want to slit his wrists and hang himself in this episode, then it would probably be decent. Hell, it might even be great. But it's that little touch that slides it right into the worst of the worst.